Hey, how's it going, guys? Domino Paris 21 here, and back with yet another deck profile for you all. So, of course, as you see here, what I have to present to you guys is my Brawler deck for post-Stride era. So, if you guys haven't been aware already, a little while back in one of my sale videos, I actually did sell off a Brawler deck myself, and pretty much at the time, I was downsizing a lot of my decks, and Narukami was a clan I was actually cutting off for my collection. So that was kind of like my end to Narukami, I guess you can say. But, you know, seeing how the deck plays out nowadays, seeing a few of my buddies play the deck, and, you know, seeing some new builds that really, you know, came up for this deck for post-Stride era, you know, I've definitely been really excited to bring this deck back and back in my collection. And definitely shoutouts to Warlike36. This deck was actually previously owned by him, but I was able to pick up the deck from him. Of course, be a good deal because, you know, we're like good friends and all, duh. But yeah, of course I made changes to the deck according to my specific liking, and definitely want to give a shout out to a few Brawler players that I've been discussing with on this deck to help, you know, give me some ideas for some of the card choices I want to go for the direction of this deck. Definitely want to give a shout out to Michael Liang from New York. Just helping me out, just sharing his ideas with the deck in terms of his build, and definitely Dominic from Virginia, representing, you know, Virginia, that's where I live, of course. He's definitely shown some his share of success as well with his Brawler build, so definitely both those guys help contribute to some of the ideas I really want to go for this deck. So yeah, without further ado, with all that being said, let's actually get started. So, first off for the starter, you of course have your Lizard Soldier Saishin. Just a great generic starter coming straight out of BT06, the start of Narukami. But yeah, it's just a really good solid card. Just on boost when the attack hits your opponent's Vanguard, countless 1, put him in Soul, and you get to retire your opponent grade 0 on your opponent's field. So obviously he's your starter killer. And really with how the Stride era is, and I guess you can say the power creep that Vanguard continues to progress on, starters play a much more significant role in a lot of viable decks in the meta, and to where it really is a source of some of ideal like first Stride plays that most decks do. Like using David and Shadow Paladins for that Aura Geyser play. Judge Bow for Revengers, and that's just to name a few. Well, both happen to be Shadow Paladins, but I digress. But yeah, a lot of starters play such a significant role in a lot of decks that, obviously just having an answer to that on the first card is always good. So just a really good generic card, obviously, to have in your arsenal. Then for grade 3s, being that, well, it's a Big Bang Knuckle deck, of course you gotta have the 8 Big Bang Knuckle Dragon and Busters and such. But yeah, ideally with Knuckle Buster, he is the ideal grade 3 to have, just because he is obviously for his cross ride with Big Bang Knuckle Dragon, and the ability to attack 4 units is still pretty powerful, especially in this meta. There's definitely a lot of pressure to just maintain some kind of field advantage. So just him being able to knock out 4 units is very powerful. It makes a really good powerful turn 3 play if possible. Now, a few things to address about these few cards. Now, it's very important to know that being that with how the Stride deck is in this particular build, you really can only ideally Stride 4 times, which is not a lot compared to how other decks can Stride, 6, 7 times and such. But really, for the strategy with this deck, you want to hopefully Legion before you Stride. So usually by turn 3, you want to hopefully try to Legion as fast as you can. That way, while you're in Legion, you can fully utilize Knuckle Turbo to pretty much knock out a whole entire field. But one thing about Big Bang Knuckle Dragon is that, obviously, with how this meta is and how everyone's afraid of their opponent striding so fast, everyone's playing that grade 2 game. They're playing that grade 2 game where they obviously, purposely grade lock themselves to prevent their opponent from striding the following turn and slow them down a bit. So Big Bang Knuckle Dragon actually makes it not that bad of a first ride either. Just because the secondary ability of when he attacks Vanguard, Soul Blast 1, give him +3, he can attack for 14,000 against usually a 9k Vanguard if your opponent ever wants to play that grade 2 game with you. So obviously after you use Saishin, you're not going to have a Vanguard booster, clearly. And really, ideally, you don't want to ever have to boost your Vanguard with a card from your hand just because it's not necessary, because you're always hitting ideal numbers at all times, usually. So I feel like it's like a minus for myself to have to, use a card, commit a card from my hand just to boost the Vanguard, which is, Knuckle Dragon's not bad in those situations, because being able to hit 14 unboosted is definitely pretty ideal. So that's just something to note about Big Bang Knuckle Dragon. So that's just another use that he does bring to the deck. And the fact is, like, Big Bang Knuckle Dragon, he doesn't have to rely on having another grade 3 in hand, like how Buster is. Although he doesn't, obviously his cost is heavier, and he only hits like 2 in the front row. Sometimes, if you're sitting on him, you're able to get some value hitting 14 by itself against your opponent's grade 2 if they try to grade lock themselves on purpose. And then your first Legion's not too bad, because usually we'll have the counterblast anyway, and knocking out 2 units is still knocking out 2 units. But most importantly, you're still set up for Knuckle Turbo. So that's just a few things I want to address on Big Bang Knuckle Dragon. Because as I discussed with some people, they feel like it's a hindrance to ride this, which it's not always, not always for the most part. Excuse me. Next for grade 2s, we have your 4 Sky Howl Dragon. So Sky Howl Dragon is easily like one of my favorite cards in the deck, and it's a card I honestly forgot about that you can utilize in this deck. Because you guys know I made budget brawlers in Legion era, and this was like a card that I didn't really utilize too heavily. But Sky Howl Dragon as a 4-of I really love, because one, obviously he's archetype being that he's archetype based, you don't have to wait to use a skill, for like post generation break 1. So if your opponent tries to rush you down a little bit, it's one way just to kind of punish your opponent a little bit for it. Maybe even knock out some key grade 2s that your opponent may rush you down with, like Tidal Assault or Twin Sword. Maybe knock out a Twin Sword before it can be very dangerous later. So it's really amazing in that aspect. And also, the main reason I have him at 4 is because it's never really a hindrance if I have multiples in my hand. In fact, I want to have multiples in my hand because obviously, one, I want to be able to use it early game in case my opponent tries to rush me or play the grade 2 game with me. He definitely contributes to dealing with that. But mostly, I like his interaction with Conquest Dragon, because it pretty much acts like a Dragonic Vanquisher. Just being able to effectively knock out the front row, guaranteed with him, and Conquest Dragon guarantees that plus 10,000 to your front row, which is really what you want to have with Conquest Dragon. So it's very, very powerful combination there. So yeah, definitely love the 4-of. And then as far as the Brawler mates are concerned, you have your 3 Slash Buster and your 2 Slash Dragon. The reason why I don't really utilize like 4 of them or not as much is because, well, 1 Slash Dragon, outside of like turn 2, to put him in the rear guard against your opponent's 9k Vanguard, it's okay to potentially hit for 19, which is really nice. But other than that, he doesn't really do too much, honestly. I mean, he's good for that 1 turn you go off with your Legion attack, but that's kind of it. And, Slash Buster is kind of, I don't feel like you need to run 4 of him, personally. But I think 3 is good just because you will be usually going into Knuckle Buster as far as your Legion, so I want to have an extra mate. But also the fact he attacks for 11 is huge to me. Just because, having standalone 11k beaters is very essential, just because when you're utilizing Conquest Dragon, just not having to boost them and they can still hit for 21 can definitely be a big difference in a lot of my games. And the fact is that he still gains the +3 when your Brawler hits, when your Brawler Vanguard hits, so you could potentially, hit like 21 in the rear guard as well. But that's pretty much my reasonings for running those ratios. And of course, running the 2 Chatara. Honestly, I may actually consider bumping this up to 3 just because the early game he's just really good, and he's just really good in general, just that pressure he brings. But I found the 2 to be fine just because I do utilize a lot of counterblasts, especially how I abuse Sky Howl. And I really don't want to cut down on any of these other 2s, so the grade 2s are pretty tight in this deck for me. But yeah, the Chataras are still really amazing. Just the amount of pressure he can bring, it's really good. And honestly, I can't recall a game that I ever lost when I'm able to, resolve a skill a few times. So definitely a very fantastic card for Narukami in general. If I wasn't even playing Brawlers, if I was playing like a generic Narukami deck, he's a for sure 4-of. The next for grade 1s, you have your 4 Anastasia. I think I just like the 4 G perfects. I mean, I know some people like to tech in like the 1 gold because they're afraid of Laurel and Cross and such. But But honestly, I can deal with those matchups, and you know, just because you run one gold does not mean that, you know, you're guaranteed to have it when your D police is going off with Laurel and Cross all the time. So I'd rather just have this just to help guarantee the unflip a little bit more often. So that's it. I mean, if D police wants to try and commit to just attacking your rear guard with the Laurel, I mean, a lot of times, especially if it's early in the game, I'll just let them, and then I'm gonna go off with my turn, knock out their whole field, and then I kind of push back at them. And same thing kind of goes with Cross, because Narukami can definitely outpace Kagero in a lot of cases. Obviously, if everything goes well for them, but it kind of depends on, you know, how you and your opponent trade turns. But if they want to go ahead and attack my rear guard, I could still guard normally, or if not, then whatever. I can just let them restand, and then I'll just push back at their field. So it's really interesting seeing Narukami and Kagero kind of like trade off turns like that. But you know, nonetheless, I still like the G perfects as a 4 of. Then you have your 4 stride enablers. Just definitely gotta have the 4 just because you want to help guarantee your striding. And seeing that your grade 3 sometimes may not always be utilized as stride fodder, just because sometimes you need to call beaters down, or you need to actually save those 3s in your hand for Knuckle Buster. Just having the 4 of to help guarantee your striding is definitely very essential. Then you have your 3 Wild Clock Dragon. It's definitely a card that that I really appreciated having in my deck, and I kind of missed, which is one thing I really love about archetype-based decks. Because it's one of those little things that, you know, I felt that was a little underappreciated, but just having 10k beaters is really good. Because again, he contributes to the grade 2 game. If my opponent wants to play a grade 2 game with me, that's great. That's fine, because most likely, especially if they're not playing like a really archetype-based deck, I will have, you know, another beater out there to utilize. So this is a really good card just to have in general for archetypes. Then you have your 2 Kohai, just your drop and draw, your cycler for the deck. So obviously when you place them on rear guard circle, if your opponent has 1 or less rear guards in the front row, discard and draw, so drop and draw. So it's really good just to help get to your Legion a little bit quicker, because like I said, if you can help it, you want to try and Legion first, so you can set up your Knuckle Turbo to get the max potency on it. So he can definitely get you to that 1 card extra to Legion. And then you have the 1 Rising Phoenix. The Rising Phoenix I actually wasn't playing before, but I felt like I could still play the 1 of. Because the thing is, excuse me guys, Knuckle Turbo does cost 1 soul to use. And then, of course, when you're talking about, you know, using him for the soul, and then using a Rising Phoenix, you're going to have no soul left. So then, you know, if you want to use Knuckle Turbo a second time, you usually may not be able to unless you have one of your like Dijin crits to put in the soul. So I feel like the 1 Rising Phoenix was fine, because I really don't want to have to draw extras of it. And if I don't end up drawing it for the game, it's not that, you know, big of a hindrance for me to be honest. But definitely, I think it's really good just to have. Obviously, free +1s are free +1s. Then for triggers, pretty straightforward. Not really going to get too in-depth about it. The 4 Dijins, definitely want to run 4 of these because it actually goes in the soul and does something, and fuel soul. And just brawler crits. So 8 crit, 4 brawler draw. I just run the different artworks because I don't want to look at the same one the whole game. And then your 4 heals. 8 crit, 4 draw, 4 heal. Pretty, you know, simple, straightforward. Now moving on to the strides itself. So first, I have the Dragonite Zoros. It's a card that I rarely get into, but some situations can call for it where, excuse me guys, a little congestion for fall. But yeah, so, you know, Zoros can definitely be situational against maybe some Legion-based decks. So maybe you can pressure your opponent so they don't maybe risk losing their mates that they may have in the drop zone already. Or maybe if your opponent only has, like, you know, maybe 1 rear guard, or maybe 2 rear guards on the field, and maybe you don't care about going to Knuckle Turbo because, you know, sometimes I'll even have like a Sky Howl in my hand so I can knock out the front row unit, and I'll just pressure my opponent to take out the last card on their field, which I don't care whether, you know, it dies or not, but it'll still take away cards from my opponents to either, you know, they take it and they lose that rear guard, or and I can potentially bind some key cards that they want to Legion back in their deck, or they obviously will just perfect guard it or burn cards just to block this. So he could definitely still poses some value, but it's a card I rarely go into. So obviously, the card you really want to go into is Knuckle Turbo. So Knuckle Turbo is a very powerful card for brawlers, and it's what gave brawlers some brand new light for Stride era. So what he does is, obviously, once you pay the cost of Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1, and Persona Flip. Not Persona Flip. You just flip up a copy of a Stride unit in your deck face up. So that's why I only play 3. Because like if you really don't need you feel like you don't need the Zoras, you can like unflip the Zoras or unflip a copy of this and save this and keep the Zoras available just in case. That's one thing I like about it in terms of the cost. So yeah, you pay that cost, and then for each Brawler Heart, you get to attack up to 3 units. So obviously, if you're not Legion, you attack 3 units. If you are Legion, then you attack the 6 units, which is literally your opponent's whole entire board. Which is why I say, like, if you can help it, you want to try and Legion first to set up those plays, because it could definitely cause for huge swings in the turnouts in a lot of games, especially in my experience. Especially when I'm able to knock out a whole board. Excuse me, if I'm able to knock out a whole board for like 2 turns. And also the fact is, like, once you're Legion, obviously, for the most part, my opponents will obviously know that I have know what this card does and be aware I have this in my deck. So they'd be very they'd be very reluctant to call units on the board because of that. And then after I stride into this once, reveal that I obviously play this card, then my opponents usually get very scared of committing extra to the board offensively. So then with that, you go into easily, honestly, what I feel is like one of the best strides in the game, and I feel is very underrated for how strong this card is. Conquest Dragon. So once my opponent doesn't want to commit extra cards to the board because they're afraid of Knuckle Turbo, I'll just go into Conquest Dragon. So Conquest Dragon is just simply put, you Persona Flip, you G Persona Flip, and then you can retire one of your opponent's front row rear guards, and then your whole entire front row gains +5 for each open rear guard. So obviously, if your opponent has a clear front row, after you use the skill, +10 to front row, which is very, very powerful, and you're obviously hitting numbers greater than what Sanctuary Guard can. And honestly, he's like the main reason why I'm really excited to play Brawlers again, or Narukami again in general, because this card, just for how good this card is. And again, like I said, guys, like I feel like this card is very, very underrated and not talked about enough, because he honestly is a very powerful card, and there are situations where he may not be effective, obviously, if your opponent has a full front row, but nonetheless, like, he's an amazing finisher in the deck. And again, it's the main reason why I run 4 Sky Howl, just to help guarantee the front row retire as much as I can. But like I said, it's a very punishing card, because after you turbo your opponent, if they get scared of committing cards, then you can use Conquest to punish them for not doing that as well. So a very strong, powerful card, because I really love this artwork. This artwork is really badass. Like, I swear, I think I have all like the Dragon Empire. I think Narukami really does take the cake for the artwork, because really, very powerful. But don't get me wrong, I love my Overlords, but Narukami has some really, really nice, cool looking artwork for a lot of their units. But yeah, there you have it, guys. That is the deck for you all. Hope you guys liked it. As always, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Any questions and concerns and stuff. But as always, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't. And as always, leave a like on the video. That's always appreciated. Once again, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys later.